Have you ever completed a nail set from beginning to end, only to realize that the shape of your nails is not really that great? It's a pretty common occurrence, especially in the beginning stages of one's nail journey. And at the beginning of my own nail journey, this was something that was incredibly frustrating and discouraging. Fortunately though, with enough time, practice, and patience, I have been able to devise a couple of tips and tricks that help me get the perfect shape every single time. And if you yourself are struggling with your nail shape, then this is the place for you. If you're new here, hi, my name is Kai, and I am a self-taught nail artist with about 5 years of experience. And today, I'm going to be providing you with some tips and tricks on how to improve the shape of your nails and what it looks like when those tips are utilized effectively. So, without further ado, welcome to Nail Shaping 101. Now, believe it or not, before we even get into the shaping process, there's a lot more to consider beforehand. Your ending nail shape is almost completely reliant on the base that you provide in the beginning stages. So before you even think of pulling out a hand file, it'll be very, very beneficial to consider your nail prep. For instance, I have slightly crooked nails, and unfortunately, there's not much that I can do about that. Either way, discrepancies like this are important for me to pay attention to. I always consider my natural nail direction when applying nail tips or moving on to extensions. And in this case, I want to apply the nail tip in a way that makes my natural nail look a little bit straighter. If your nail tips or forms are not applied with your natural nail shape and direction in mind, it can negatively impact your end result. So even though it may feel counterintuitive to focus so heavily on the shape at this point, setting a good foundation is absolutely essential, not only for proper structural integrity, but beautifully shaped nails. The size of your nail tips is also going to matter just as much, if not more. Nail sizes can be pretty tricky, especially if they're in between two different sizes, and usually in this case, it's best to go with the larger size and adjust it to your nail rather than using a tip that is too small. Using a nail tip that is too small can lead to not only discomfort for you or your client, but it can also lead to potential natural nail damage, especially if the stress points and sidewalls of your natural nails are still exposed. And that is something that we of course want to avoid at all costs. So when you are sizing out your nails, make sure that it absolutely fits from sidewall to sidewall and that it fits comfortably. The extension process is a major factor in your overall nail shape. And while it seems a lot faster and more convenient to just get the product onto the nail and worry about the rest later, a lot of thought has to go into this step. As an acrylic-based nail artist myself, it's absolutely crucial for me to think through this process, as it is a pretty difficult medium to master for beginners. But even gel-based extensions require practice and patience. It takes time, but practicing your application will inevitably result in better structure and a better nail shape. Personally, I've been using acrylic for a pretty long time, so my application usually follows the 3 to 4 bead method. Even still, I always advocate for using as many beads of product until the structure is as close to correct as possible, because proper structure at this stage is going to be very helpful in the end. Now, of course, nothing is ever going to be perfect, but if you can get your structure as close to correct as possible, that is going to greatly decrease the time you spend filing and shaping these nails, which in turn is going to help make the process a lot more efficient. And this is just my opinion, but I would personally rather spend a lot more time on my application rather than spending a lot of time trying to fix and correct everything. Now that your application is done, the obvious next step is to shape these babies. And this is where things can get kind of tricky for some. Now, this process, especially for beginners, is always going to be kind of stressful, especially if shaping is not your strong suit. But I found that sticking to a few key steps can take a lot of the stress out of this process. Firstly, it'll be easier to see what you're working with after you shape these sidewalls and underside of the nail. For this, I always use an 80/80 grit nail file for an extra crispy edge. Now, the grit and quality of your nail files can play a pretty big part in your overall shape. Lower grits are really useful for harder products such as acrylic and can speed up the overall process. But even still, it's important to be extremely careful with these for that exact reason. Regardless of efficiency and speed, you don't want to risk cutting yourself or your clients. So to counteract this, filing the edges of your nail file with another nail file or a sanding band can help to soften the edges and reduce the chances of cutting yourself. The brand that I like to use is called Pana, and I've been using these for as long as I've done YouTube. And of course, this is not sponsored in any way, but I really do like these nail files. It took me a while to realize this, but poor quality nail files and just nail products in general can make the process a lot more stressful. And in this case, if you have poor quality nail files, there's a good chance that that nail file is partly responsible for wonky looking nails. It's going to be important to find nail files with not only a good grit, but with a sturdy and strong feel. We don't want our nail files to start bending too much and breaking and peeling when we're shaping, because that's going to lead to, of course, a lot of stress and frustration. So when you're looking for nail files, make sure that they are as sturdy and strong as possible. Now, back to the sidewalls. When shaping your nails with files, holding them parallel to the sidewalls is going to be good for maintaining the overall shape. This is important for every shape, of course, but in this case, it's going to be even more important for these square nails. Here we can see what it looks like to hold the nail file properly and what effect that gives. The sidewalls are still nice and straight and neat and parallel to one another. Now that those sidewalls are done, let's move on to the underside of the nail. With cleaner application, this process won't take you too long, but in case there's any excess product underneath, this is a good opportunity to go ahead and fix that. Here, you're going to want to be very mindful of your natural nail and your stress points, because you really don't want to overfile and cause any damage to the natural nail. And of course, the same sentiment applies when filing these sidewalls. The health of your nails really should not be compromised for a good nail shape, so definitely do be careful here. And this is why I put so much emphasis on making sure to use the correct sized nail tips, because the nail file is not only going to provide you with a nice nail shape, it's also going to protect the natural nail from being accidentally filed too much. So yeah, we wanted to emphasize that point. So now that the nail shape is restored, it's time to file the main bulk of the nail. I would recommend starting with a nail file as a beginner, as nail drills can sometimes be hard to control. When filing the main body of the nail, I purposely refrain from filing over the apex, and I'm only focusing on the area just above that. Here, we're just ensuring that this part of the nail is free of any lumps and bumps. And during this entire process, I do like to make sure to look at the nail from various angles. This is going to allow me to see what needs to be fixed and what needs to be filed, as well as keep an eye on the overall symmetry of the nail. When filing the main portion of the nail, you'll really want to maintain the curvature of the nail as best as possible. Now, some people have different preferences on how this looks, but for absolute structural integrity, keeping this curvature is necessary to prevent from breaking them. You'll be able to see a little bit more of this curvature if you look down the barrel of the nail, and when you're looking down the barrel, it should give you a nice round and curved shape. And now it's finally time to seal these cuticles and correct our apex with a hand drill. Of course, you can absolutely use a nail file for this step, but I personally always use a carbide bit, so definitely use whatever works best for you. The goal here is to make the blend between the product and my cuticle as natural as possible. I'm going to be holding the bit parallel to the extension product on top to make sure that I don't create any rings of fire and damage. When filing directly on top of the natural nail, it's necessary to keep the bit moving to prevent heat spikes and also to make sure that you're maintaining a level of symmetry. As for the apex, I always move in a horizontal motion rather than a vertical motion. We want to keep the most height here, and we want to make sure that, again, we are maintaining the curvature. And again, it's very important to make sure to look at the nail from various angles just to make sure that things are looking the way it should. Next, it's time to go ahead and buff out those scratches. Most times I use the same carbide bit to remove the scratches with ease, but a buffing block is going to do the exact same thing. If you do find yourself using a carbide bit to remove the scratches, you want to make sure to apply the lightest pressure possible, because you don't want to actually file into the product. You just want to get rid of any of those surface scratches, so use a very light hand during this step. And to close off the shaping, I'm going to file underneath the tip of the nail. This is definitely not a necessary step, but it does create a thinner and crispier appearance. Now, of course, don't go overboard here. There still needs to be a decent thickness to prevent the ends from breaking off, so begin with a medium speed, such as 7,000 to 8,000 RPMs, just to prevent from overfiling. And as you gain more precision, you can look into increasing the speed. And after those steps, the shaping is complete. With all of these factors in mind, do remember that just knowing what to do won't be enough to improve your shaping. You're going to have to execute these factors as much as you can. Practice as many times as you can and on anyone who will let you. It's not going to be easy, but it's certainly not impossible to improve the shape of your nails. And I think that's the fun part of nail artistry, because all of your imperfections and errors will inevitably lead to improvement, no matter how long it takes. So from someone who used to be a beginner, definitely do not give up. There is absolutely no possible way to get worse, but only to get better. And with that, I hope that this was useful to you. If you'd like to see more educational videos, let me know down below. But for now, that's all that I have for you all today. As always, I want to say thank you guys so much for tuning in today, and I will see you guys in the next one.